I am currently the Dean of the School of Business at Woxsen University. I originally come from Spain, Europe. So I've been here for the last 7 years in India. And especially my area of expertise is AI, machine learning, robotics, as well as other emerging technologies, but core area of expertise is AI. I mainly specialize within AI in the application in human resources as well as other managerial areas. So this is very briefly the bandwidth I touch upon. I did not want to perish, hence I felt that data science was the key in order to have a fruitful future. If you look at the world 3 to 5 years ago, it used to be all about business analytics, business intelligence, data science. That has quickly moved on to AI and machine learning, and now is moving towards blockchain, VR, AR, and so on. So the world is moving real fast. At that time, I did not want to lag behind. And somewhere I found a connection between my original background in psychology, sociology, anthropology, or so-called liberal arts, and the connection with technology. And ultimately, obviously, I discovered that the origin and basics of AI and machine learning is not computer science, but psychology. So touching upon that is where I built the connection. And ultimately, obviously, if you want to develop any sort of intelligence, you first need to understand human intelligence, which unfortunately is quite lacking nowadays everywhere. So we have to analyze that first. Ultimately, all businesses will have to replace general clerical tasks or administrative tasks, which are repetitive or pattern-based in nature. With AI and ML, by default, there's no choice about this. There is no choice simply because the amount of data will always be growingly ever increasing. So there is always a cap, and we as human beings, and considering our cognitive capabilities, we have limitations, which machines do not. And machines do not take holidays, they do not take sick leaves, and they do not take pregnancy leaves, or for that matter, they don't resign. So ultimately, all those tasks can be easily replaced. And yes, obviously, there's going to be a job change in the market, but this is another industrial revolution like it happened before. There's nothing to be fearful about. There's only the need to upskill yourself rather than just blame technology. Ultimately, we go into a diplomatic perspective or answer. It will be mainly focused upon that jobs will not be lost, people can be relaxed, do not panic. Ultimately, if I provide a realistic answer, it will be more on the basis of if you do not really upskill yourself, not to compete with technology, but to be able to cope with the developments and at least understand what is happening, then we are in deep trouble. Simply because when you're running a machine learning algorithm, you might not know how to code it, and that is all well and good. You might not even come from that background, but you need to comprehend what is happening, what's going on. That is the important part, to have that comprehension. And refusal to learn technological inputs or emerging technologies is certainly not the way to proceed. And obviously, it will have a huge domino effect, especially in the job market and when it comes to job availability. So ultimately, I as an individual or anybody else has no choice but to embrace technology and to embrace the knowledge that it brings about. And of course, hope for the best and upskill yourself, expecting a better outcome in the future. Well, on the one hand, the first part of the question, when we talk about AI, AGI, and SCI, AI will be artificial intelligence, which is what we know today. Siri, Cortana, Alexa, all these natural language processing tools, which are pretty basic in nature. Then you have AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. That will be AI, as we know it, reaching the level of cognitive development as human beings. So basically at our level, par with us. If you look at ASI, we are looking at artificial superintelligence. So there, as the term itself indicates, we are going to go, the AI is going to go beyond us. So there's going to reach a point where it's called singularity. Now, singularity is that period of time which we have somehow predicted, though it's not sure, where technology will surpass the human cognitive capabilities. Basically, they will be better than us and more capable. That is what people fear. That is why movies like Terminator and iRobot and all these apocalyptic Hollywood movies come in the picture. That is pretty unrealistic anyway. And if we are looking at that perspective, we are still targeting some 70 to 80 years down the line. So it's not something that I or anybody else will be able to see probably. So ultimately, there is not much to be worried about at this point in time on that side. If you look at the second part of the question, when it comes to the future technologies, it's going to be a tricky environment because ultimately there has to be a correlation between societal approval and understanding and acceptance and the development of these technologies side by side. If we develop technologies but then people don't want to accept it or they want to somehow be scared of it or be fearful of it, then it's a gone point because ultimately we will have to call off all the technological developments. And even if we implement them and people do not want to utilize them, then it's again a failure. So there has to be a side-by-side correlation. This was seen in the US where when Facebook developed a natural language processing tool, basically another language, another chatbot, and the chatbots developed their own languages. This happened some 2-3 years back. Now, this came in the news, was quite trending. Even if these chatbots developed their own language and we are not able to understand it, why are we portraying it as such a fearful task or situation? We only created those chatbots with the sole intention of making it become SCI. Now, if we get scared when they actually do that, then ultimately we are failing on our own human intelligence because we designed those tools to do that only. And if it's doing it and then we get scared, it leads me to question human IQ, ultimately, not the technological development. So this correlation has to happen in society in order to be fruitful, otherwise it will be a complete failure. Well, Facebook, Google, Instagram, Snapchat, all of them utilize various machine learning algorithms for various tools. Even if you look at the infamous Netflix and Amazon Prime, they also use a recommendation system which is machine learning based. On the other hand, if we go a bit more on the social relationship perspective, you have applications like Tinder, for example, which is pretty trending, which is also utilizing machine learning algorithms to match each other. So you don't have to flirt anymore with anybody. Tinder will do it for you. So ultimately, we are relying on machine learning to decide our emotional response and our emotional attachments in the future. And any other browser that you might be using, probably all the browsers you are using, especially Google, are using machine learning algorithms. They're collecting data, processing that, and ultimately creating patterns and hence running the algorithm very smoothly. So what people believe is just advanced technologies, ultimately very basics, narrow of machine learning algorithms. And this happens with Siri, with Cortana, with Alexa, even Google Home, Amazon Echo, all that is the simplest technology we can come across nowadays are utilizing AI. Well, if you look at, for example, accounts department, even Excel has machine learning algorithms now and can create data, not just process it, can create data by itself. On top of that, if we are looking at the healthcare sector, there is slight research happening, which I am myself involved with, when it comes to the printing of organs, of human organs utilizing machine learning. Now, this can be a huge revolution in healthcare, because if we are able to print organs and we don't wait for any sort of donors to come, then we can imagine the impact in the healthcare industry and the organ donation and transplant can be huge. On the other hand, finance happens more of the same. There is algo trading. So ultimately, we are using algorithms to trade and predict the stock market values, considering the geopolitical conditions also. So there is a huge linkage in the algorithm between the news as well as the current financial market and building the correlation in that. So ultimately, my advice to business owners or entrepreneurs would be mainly to keep your eyes open and your ears quite attentive, because the revolution, so-called revolution, though I hate the word, but the revolution, technological revolution is there and is very much happening daily. So the changes will happen in a snap and there is no time to wait. And if you wait, somebody else will take over you and the race will just be prioritized over your opposition. So ultimately, every field is going to be impacted somehow, maybe slightly, maybe in a larger manner, but ultimately you have to keep yourself open to new possibilities. I could add one comment based on especially a life perspective in relation to technology, which would be we are in a time where you can choose to either get busy living or get busy dying. So you choose whether you adjust and you cope and you upskill yourself, though it's going to be tough, or we just rather complain, whine and cry about it and think that nothing will happen because we're doing that. And that is an unrealistic perspective, pretty draconian, and ultimately it will lead nowhere rather than our own extinction. So if we have and if we are born to embrace technology, then the time is now to really embrace it. Even if we can stuff, we really have no choice. Earlier we might have a choice. Now there is no whether I want to do it or I don't want to do it. There is only the option of I have to do it. So we have to go in that direction as well. I bring a panel discussion where obviously data science will be the main topic, probably in correlation to some business field. So ultimately we will be discussing applications as well as implementation and I suppose limitations within the same range as well.